Hello everyone. This video, I am just going to show off basically everything about my Essence Drain build that I built this league, the Settlers League 3.25. This was my first league that I actually really played PoE. I played a little bit last league and got to Act 3 and just kind of stopped playing and went back to Ark Survival Ascended. But I really buckled down and was in the queue day one and just played hundreds of hours this league. And I started with Essence Drain. I followed a build guide, and I've completely went away from that and have been path of building my own Essence Drain for a long time now. And this is what it's gotten to. I can do Ubers. I can farm T17. I definitely rip a lot, but I definitely don't run out of portals ever, as long as I roll my maps correctly. So this video did get a lot longer than I really intended. I just explain everything about the build and the abilities and just everything I can, because that's kind of just what I do on this channel, is thoroughly explain everything. So almost anyone could understand. I might not be perfect at it, because I'm not explaining like the very basic, if you've played the game, you should be able to understand. Not like if you've never played Path of Exiles, you should be able to understand. But I'm going to keep it like this and see if people like it and how the video does. Feel free to comment what you would rather see if this is a problem for you. But let's get right into it. First, I'll explain the actual abilities that I use. I've been using 4 abilities since the very beginning of the campaign, ever since I've been allowed to get the skill gems, and they are Essence Drain, Contagion, Bane, and Blight, and I also have Vow Blight here. All the abilities, they do chaos dot damage. Essence Drain does have a hit portion to it, but it does not do much damage. It's all about the dot damage afterwards. You can see it actually does quite a bit, but it's not very good at clearing on its own. Say I'm actually killing enemies pretty fast. But what I will use to clear maps is Contagion. You can see it also does dot damage, and when it kills an enemy, it will spread to the next one and the next one, and it's not doing much damage on its own, but it will actually carry the damage from Essence Drain. It's just a unique mechanic between them, and let me get that off. So I will Contagion this pack, and then hit one of them with Essence Drain, and you can see it kills a lot faster with the two of them actually going. So you just kind of want to focus AoE on Contagion and then damage on Essence Drain, and that's how you clear maps. When I come up to bosses, I hit them with Essence Drain, and Contagion doesn't do much, don't really use that, but I will start applying Blight to them, which can stack up to 20 times, and I think we'll actually, at max stacks, we'll end up doing more dot damage than Essence Drain will. And when the boss or enemy has a lot of health, it'll be Essence Drain, Blight, and I will use Vow Blight, which also has its own dot damage and makes enemies take 20% increased damage, which is very nice. Basically, every enemy's health bar with this build is like a loading bar in reverse, and every time I apply another layer of damage to them, it just makes the bar speed up. So when you use Vow Blight, it just really makes that bar just go way faster. And then along with these, I also have Bane, which I'll apply to any enemy that takes more than 0.1 second to die. And it's not really, it does do a lot of damage at base, honestly, but I don't have any gems scaling it. I actually only have 3 curses linked to it, because when you use Bane, it will also apply any curses that you have linked to it. It's hard to see because they die so fast, but on that rare enemy, you can see he has curses on him. You can see all the curses appear for a second before they die. It is actually good damage, and people do use this as their main damaging skill, but it's just to apply curses for my build. Okay, so I'm just going to get into the build now. I'll mostly talk about the defensive nature parts of the build, because I think it's actually more interesting than the offensive. But I just want to take a look at this Timeless Jewel first. It's an Elegant Hubris, and I have it commemorating Caspero, which gives me this keystone here that lets me ignore all attribute requirements, so I can put on any kind of gear with any kind of attributes that I have, but I don't really get any bonuses from my attributes. I don't get the increased energy shield and mana from my intelligence, so there's really just no reason to spec into intelligence or any attribute for that matter, which really frees up the build. and makes it so I don't have to do this weird attribute balancing game, because I have on auras that require a lot of dex, a lot of strength, and then Blight takes 155 intelligence. It's just too much to do on this build, honestly. So this Timeless Jewel really opened up the build when I put it on, and I really enjoy it. It just didn't really fit into talking about it anywhere else, so I wanted to get that out of the way. Essence Drain regenerates your life when it's applied to an enemy. And you can see I'll hit this boss here, and I just really don't leave max health for more than a fraction of a second, just because of how much it heals you. You can see it wore off there, and I'll apply it again, and it just zoops right back up. So the whole philosophy behind the defense of this build is don't get one shot, because you'll be able to heal everything back before you get hit again. And like I said, Essence Drain heals, or it regenerates life. So I put on Zealot's Oath, so it regenerates Energy Shield instead, because that's the main pool that we're trying to protect ourselves with. And then, of course, with any Energy Shield build that's not Chaos Inoculation, you kind of just got to use Chevron's Wrappings, so Chaos damage does not bypass Energy Shield. So the whole idea of not getting one shot, I go about that a few ways. First, I have max resist, the full 90%. Right here, and I do that with the Melding of the Flesh Jewel, which I think is pretty common in this league. I don't know how popular it's been before, but you actually lose max resist, and you lose a lot of elemental resistances. This is actually the minimum that you can lose. You can lose a bit more, but I have this perfectly rolled. And then the benefit of this is that the elemental resistances are capped by your highest maximum elemental resistance instead. So you just have to get one elemental resistance to cap, and then all of your other ones will be able to get to cap also. And I do that with lightning resist here. There's a few things that I use. The main one is obviously with Mage Blood. You can put on one of these flasks, and you have 5% to maximum lightning resistance. And with the increased effect of the flask, it actually goes to 9%. And then one of the many auras that I have on is Purity of Lightning, which also increases your maximum lightning resistance by 5%. It's like 4% by default, but I have a lot of things increasing the level of this gem. The level of the gem itself is 21. The Chevron's Wrappings increase the level of the gem by 3. And then also my staff increases the level of the gem by 2 because it's a spell skill gem. And then my amulet is increasing the level of the skill gem also. So it ends up taking it up to 5% additional. And then in combination with some of the increased effect on these nodes, it increases the max resistance even more. I get 2% maximum lightning resistance from my helmet. I have to use an Orb of Conflict to get it this high. It's one of, I think it's the Exarch. Yeah, the Searing Exarch Implicit that does this. And then this notable right here gives me some maximum lightning resistance. And that, I think, is all the ways that I get my lightning resistance up. And on top of just the maximum elemental resistances, the actual like elemental resistance percent goes down by 70%. I'll show you that here. If I take off these, it should be like, I don't think I have any other lightning resistance on. Maybe I have some, but like negative 98%. So you need to put a lot of resistance into your build to make up for that, which is crazy. And so I get a lot of my lightning resistance from my flask, obviously, and then also my Purity of Lightning gives me a ton, and then my Chevron's Wrappings actually have lightning resist on it also, so that gets me above the cap on its own. And then I can just designate all my other resistances on my armor and stuff to fire and cold. So that's pretty nice, and that's really what it is. A lot of tier 1 fire and cold. Fire, cold, and I have chaos in this one. We'll talk about that in a sec. And then I have cold, fire. It's all fire and cold resistance everywhere. On these small cluster jewels, I have cold, all resistances. On this one, I have fire and chaos resistance. So yeah, just fire and cold everywhere. And then since I don't have Chaos Inoculation, I do need Chaos Resistance, and luckily the one good thing with Occultist is on this notable here, you get 60% Chaos Resistance, and the Melding of the Flesh Jewel does not reduce the Chaos Resistance, it's only Elemental Resistances, so we don't got to worry about getting too much chaos, just the normal amount. So we have 60% here. On my Timeless Jewel, I have 37%. You saw my small cluster up here, I have some chaos resistance. And then on my boots, I think I showed you that I have chaos resistance to reach the cap at 75% here. I go a little bit over. I go a little bit over on all of them because there's like different rare and magic enemy modifiers that will lower it. So I just like to go a good bit above, so I never have my fire resistance like lowered. Then I get hit by a big fire move and then die because of it. And then that only really covers my elemental resistances and chaos, but for physical hits, I just have a bunch of armor, basically. I have an armor flask with mage blood, so I get a ton from this. I get a ton from determination, which is not unusual. And then I also have a notable that gives me increased armor, and that's basically it. I just have 28,000 armor from that. I do have a Watcher's Eye that is double determination, and I get 8% additional physical damage reduction from one of the modifiers. Talk about the rest later. But yeah, that's just how I survive physical hits. Pretty simple. And then any hit that I take, I just heal it back. I'm just not getting one shot for the most part. And on top of resisting a lot of damage, I just have a pretty large pool to actually like take damage in and then heal it back with my energy shield. And this is like the original reason that I switched to energy shield, is because when you have life, you need way more resistance than I have now with like endurance charges and block and stuff like that. And I just can't really fit that into the build. So I just went to energy shield instead. I was chaos inoculation at one point, but I switched to this. And I still have a large energy shield pool, obviously from my armor. All my armor is pretty much intelligence armor. Sadly, I had to use Chevron's wrappings and not like a Twilight Regalia, which would have given me so much more. My ring is like a mirrored ring. I bought this for like literally 30 chaos, and it has 110 energy shield on it, and I just duplicate that with Calandra's Touch. My staff even has some energy shield on it on the Implicits, and I do have some of these small cluster jewels. I get 27 maximum energy shield for each one of the small passives, which is pretty crazy. These small cluster jewels are fucking OP, honestly. They're so good. I get so much from this one little node. This is just one of them. This is not all of these together. Just each one has this. I think that's wild. And then I take a bunch of the increased maximum energy shield nodes. I don't need any of the recharge nodes because I don't recharge energy shield. I just regenerate it. And then for the mastery, these are the 3 ones I take. I do switch between the light radius and the less physical damage taken, depending on the map. If it's a dark map, I'll just switch to the light radius because it's kind of annoying. You can actually see how crazy it is. Like, this is with the light radius on right now. And then without it, I think it was this one. So you can see it gets real dark real fast. So it is annoying to not have it on, but I mean, you really don't need it. It's kind of quality of life. And one of the more glaring things that I haven't talked about are all these tattoos. They all give 3% increased maximum energy shield. And that's because of my Timeless Jewel keystone, where I don't get any benefits from my attributes at all. So I don't get increased energy shield from my intelligence stat. So there's no point in putting it on gear. There's no point in having these stay just intelligence. You just put tattoos on literally everything and just take those bonuses instead. And I mean, these would usually give 10 intelligence, which would give 2% energy shield. So this is actually more from it. You also get mana, but I really don't use my mana much. And so I just take a lot of energy shield. And I am using a staff. So I do take this cluster here. It does give me some AoE. This really doesn't matter too much because I'm not using power charges anymore in this build. And then I don't really have much spell block. So I'm getting 8%, which will save me here and there, but it's not really anything significant. But what is significant is the mastery here. I get 30% increased defenses while wielding a staff. So that's increasing my armor, my energy shield, and I really don't have evasion, so it's not really increasing that. But I think that's everything that it does, which is definitely a nice bonus, along with the AoE. I kind of like this cluster here. One of the other things that could definitely kill me is crits. So I actually have 100% reduced extra damage from critical strikes with this mod on my Watcher's Eye. I take 60% reduced, and actually this Watcher's Eye is perfectly divined, except for mana, so that's pretty lit. But yeah, I get 60% reduced from here, and then when I curse an enemy, I get 40% reduced on them also. So when there's like really scary enemies, just got to make sure to curse them. And I assume that these add together for 100% reduced extra damage from critical strikes, and they don't just multiply separately, which would be sucky. But I'm pretty sure it's working because since I've done it, I feel pretty tanky and comfortable. And yeah, this is just a really cool way to get this 100% reduced extra damage from critical strikes. When it comes to movement speed, I have tier 1 movement speed in my boots. I have both of these flasks. It's Onslaught, which gives movement speed, and cast speed, which is like super important for Essence Drain because it casts so slow. And if I need it to be on enemies basically at all times when they're in front of me, if I cast slow and they just hit me 3 times, especially like a pack of enemies, if they just freaking maul me while I'm trying to cast on them, then I'm just dead. So cast speed super important on this build too. So having Mage Blood increased effect Onslaught is super important. And then of course a Quicksilver Flask to get around faster, which when I got Mage Blood, that's like the biggest things. These were set in stone on my build. I love this. It feels so good. And then I also put haste on my build very recently, and this was like the last little thing that made this build feel just so good with so much movement speed and cast speed also. And I do have cast speed on this ring that I'm duplicating. It's actually pretty high above what it could be since it's one of the mirrored rings, and I need to change my ring. It's actually kind of good, kind of mid though. Definitely could be better, but having cast speed on the ring is super cool too. I don't think I have cast speed in many other places because I get a lot from my Onslaught, my haste, and that ring. I do have some crafted on my staff too. That all kind of just comes into the defense category. But along with haste on my Watcher's Eye, I also make it so I have phasing at all times. I was running a lot of simulacrums, and the enemies, you're just always getting stuck on them. And when they slow you down with like that little pool of hands they put on the ground, it gets super annoying to get stuck and slowed and all this stuff. You really just want to get out of that pool as fast as you can. So being stuck in the enemies was just killing me all the time. So I looked for this Watcher's Eye. This is how I found this crazy double determination one, because now I just have phasing at all times when I have haste on, which is always. So I just have pure phasing. I don't have to rely on Withering Step to give me phasing because I want to use it to apply Wither debuff to enemies, not for defense and movement speed, literally just to puke out my Withering onto the enemies all the time. I just don't want to waste it on using the phasing, and if it's not up, then it's just useless either way. So this just makes it so I can use Withering Step offensively, and I have phasing all the time defensively. I do have the Storm Shroud Jewel, which is... Oh, I also have some lightning resistance on this too, but this makes it so I don't take elemental ailments by having 100%... I think it's on my Quicksilver, yeah. The Bog Moss Flask. 52% chance to avoid being shocked, plus the increased effect. Makes it so it's 100%... I think it's 101% chance to not be shocked, which means that I don't get burnt or chilled or froze or anything else because of this jewel. Lastly, I do have an Adorned jewel where it makes it so my magic corrupted jewels get double effect. Well, not double. At a perfect roll, it's double effect, but mine's at 80% because I'm not rich. But I do have some good implicits that give a lot of quality of life. I can't be maimed, so I'm not slowed. Increased area effect isn't really defensive, but I do have a unique jewel that I kind of want to replace with an Adorned jewel, and I'll talk about that later. But right now, I have Witchbane to be immune to curses, since I'm cursing enemies. Basically, every time I kill a cursed enemy, I get like 24 seconds of curse immunity, which is a lot and perfect for mapping, but sometimes when I'm fighting bosses, and there's like, I think there's a map mod, or it's some mod that makes it so curses get reflected. So when I'm fighting a boss and I curse them and they reflect onto me, that's really annoying because I haven't killed an enemy recently because I've been fighting a boss. So this isn't perfect right now. and I have different plans that I'll talk about at the end for this. I just basically want to put on another magic corrupted jewel instead of that. That will also be you cannot be hindered, or I'll get my you cannot be hindered from something else. But yeah, hinder and maim slow you down, which is super annoying, especially when it's like comboed or with something that slows your action speed. You're basically just frozen in place, which is obnoxious. I'm not immune to poison. Gosh, I don't even know how to open up the... Here we go. I'm not immune to poison. I just have on this minor Pantheon. My major Pantheon's this one. Just reduce some more damage and not get poisoned too much. It's generally only a problem on T17s when I get schmacked with something big. I don't think I'll be able to ever fit poison immunity onto the build. So when it comes to offense, I already explained more or less how my skills work, but Essence Drain is my main damage for map clearing and bosses. I think Blight ends up doing more damage once it's fully stacked, but it is not my mapping skill. Essence Drain is my damage, defense, and mapping clearing. It's actually pretty nice in combination with contagion. Contagion is mine is huge. This is a big contagion, the biggest contagion some would say. And I get this from obviously AoE support. I have Intensify support. Those both increase the AoE. But also Enhance will increase the AoE of Contagion because the quality increase from Contagion increases its base radius. So I obviously have a 20% one, I have Enhance, and then my Ashes of Stars Amulet also increases the quality of my skill gem. So in combination with all of that, I have a little bit of AoE on a gem somewhere. I think this one, yeah, is the Implicit. And then also, I think I talked about the 2 small passives that give me AoE while wielding a staff. So yeah, just with all of that, I actually just obliterate maps. Enemies die off screen like no other. Let me get a glacier map. And yeah, the bigger the pack size, the more close enemies are to each other. So it just chains way better. This is just a normal T16, so it could be even better if it was more juiced. You can just see enemies way over there died. It can get better than that. Yeah, just all around me, they're dying. Those enemies that were still there just even came back around and killed them. Yeah, that was a good one right there. Oh, I didn't cast again. That was all from one cast. Oh, it's so delicious. And when I kill bosses, it's about the same. Just hit them with Essence Drain, spray them with Blight. I'm sure you'll see it in some B-roll. It's really nothing interesting. And then also apply Withering Step for Withered stacks. And I basically can do that every 3 seconds, which is about how long they last. And then Withering is so good. It increases your damage by so much. And the Occultist has something along with that after 15 seconds, I don't even have to press my Withering Step anymore because the Occultist applies a Withering stack to every enemy that's nearby her every second. And they last 15 seconds, which is unheard of for Withered stacks. I keep calling them Withering, but it's Withered stacks. So basically, if she's by an enemy for 15 seconds, they're fully withered until she's not near them, and then they'll start to decay. But yeah, I basically have Withering Step to apply it to enemies when I'm mapping, so it kills like magic hordes that are really strong or rare enemies. She applies these really slow, so Withering Step just freaking plows them onto there really fast, and then after so long I don't have to keep hitting it, so it does take down like the actions a little bit, but I kind of like pressing all the buttons, so it's not a big deal for me. I actually apply 13 Wither debuffs on enemies every time I press it, between the quality from the gem, my Ashes of Stars, and then the level of the gem itself from my staff, and I think, yeah, it's just from my staff. Oh, and the Ashes of Stars amulet actually gives it another Withered stack too. And then along with Blight, Essence Drain, and Withering Step on bosses and tough rare enemies, I also cast Bane on them, which does a little bit of damage, nothing too notable, but I mean, it's actually way better than like Contagion's damage, but basically applied on them because it applies 3 curses. Enfeeble is actually something I should have talked about in the defense part. It really just reduces their accuracy and reduces the damage of the enemies. I guess probably not a pinnacle bosses, but all rare and unique enemies will do less damage to me. And then also, of course, when I apply curses to enemies, they do less crit to me from that mastery that I talked about earlier. But yeah, so Enfeeble just makes enemies do less damage. And then with the actual doing damage part, I have Despair, which decreases the enemy's resistance. And then I have Punishment, which when the enemy's below 50% health, I'll do 64% increased damage, which is actually crazy. You can see the huge difference between above 50%, and then when the loading bar gets below 50%, it just speeds up entirely because of this. And then also, defensively, the enemies are debilitated when they hit me, which means I think they do 10% less damage to me after they hit me the first time, more or less. And I can apply these 3 curses because to get the mastery, I actually spec'd into Whispers of Doom, so I can apply additional curse there. And I even took the long route because I get increased effect, and then more AoE in my hex skills instead of going up this way with increased cast speed, which you don't need increased cast speed on Bane. I just casted it like fucking 7 times there. It's so fast. And then I also get another curse from this here. I guess it's my Ascendancy notable. And then also I can affect hexproof enemies, which is honestly just amazing quality of life. It sucks when you come across hexproof enemies and their loading bar is just crazy slow because I can't apply all the debuffs to them. It's just all these Ascendancy notables are just freaking set in stone. I really cannot put on Profane Bloom. It's not fun like to get rid of any of these hexproof enemies, apply a ton of Withered, and then Vile Bastion. Should have talked about it in the defense section. But I am stun immune because I always have energy shield. I don't really care about the regeneration too much. It's definitely nice when I'm in a pack of enemies, but I mostly die when there's only one enemy around that's hard to heal off of, so Vile Bastion doesn't help then. But I cannot be stunned while I have energy shield, which is just buttery smooth to run through maps, not getting clipped every few seconds to stop moving. So these are just... I did have Forbidden Power at one point when my build was completely different, but again, just not having these 3 just feels terrible. I do get a little bit of Profane Bloom on my build with this Cluster Jewel notable right here, Unspeakable Gifts. Instead of a 50% chance for cursed enemies to explode, I get a 10% chance for any enemy to explode when they die. So it's pretty nice. It's just a good, you have Profane Bloom, or we have Profane Bloom at home. I had to put on a random notable here to move Unspeakable Gifts now, so I don't have to waste extra points. And yeah, just having this on the build at all is very nice because I don't have to feel like I should take this to help my clear out. Okay, so now we get to why I am low life. It's because of Pain Attunement, basically. 30% more spell damage when you're on low life. This is not increased spell damage, this is more. So this is multiplicative. This is very strong since it's not obvious, but in both Essence Drain and Blight's very long descriptors, it does say in there that their damage, or the dot damage that they apply, is increased by spell damage. So Pain Attunement and anything else that increases spell damage, such as this notable and this notable that I have, does increase the damage by a lot. Also, I have on Tranquility, which gives me Transfiguration of Soul. And what Transfiguration of Soul does is, it's actually right there. Increases and reductions to maximum energy shield also apply to spell damage at 30% of their value. So I'm energy shield build, so I have a lot of things that increase my energy shield, which also increases my spell damage. So that's where I'm getting a lot of my damage from. And this is why I'm not Chaos Inoculation, because you cannot do Pain Attunement with Chaos Inoculation, because your life is always 1, so you're never at low life. But since I have life reserved, I am always at low life, so I always have this damage increase. And then I also have on Righteous Fire, and that is because Righteous Fire has a, let's see where I'm at, I get 43% more spell damage, so that's also multiplicative. And then I do have Zealotry as a aura, which is not as much, but you and nearby allies deal 17% more spell damage, which is also multiplicative. Other things that are multiplicative are your gems that support And you can see that with Righteous Fire on, I don't die fast, and that's because of all the regeneration I have. I think you saw earlier that I regenerate 3% of my life per second during the effect of my flask, which is also buffed by the increased effect. So I like 5, almost 6% per second is regened. I regen life on my ring, which is really nice, and that's duplicated. I think the energy shield mastery, I regenerate 2% of energy shield per second. So I am regenerating energy shield really fast, and along with my 90% fire resist, I can keep up Righteous Fire at all times. So yeah, those multiplicative sources of damage are super important. I got a little bit of chaos damage on my tree. This increases the effect of Withered, which is really good. This does a little bit of chaos resistance, damage penetration. These notables are pretty strong. Dark Ideation used to be better on my build because I had more mana. Right now it's kind of weak. I could actually do much better on my large cluster jewels, I think. Wicked Pull, 30% increased chaos damage is really good. I do not have a lot of chaos damage on my tree because you just don't get much for a lot of like passive points. I think it's pretty bad for the most part. I did have like all of them at one point, and just slowly it was the most efficient thing to get rid of, which is really funny. I do have a good amount from my large cluster jewels. I used to have more. I wish I could take Unholy Grace because I get a little bit of cast speed, and the chaos damage is obviously very good. I do obviously have the Adorned, which is giving me a lot of chaos damage over time multiplier and increased energy shield, along with the quality of life implicits that I have. This cluster jewel's freaking perfect. I think it is one roll off of perfect. I think the energy shield has a higher roll. It could be. I think this is like a tier 2 on the implicits of these synthesized implicit. But yeah, this is like a perfect jewel. I paid like 15 div for this. I really can't do any other ones with that because I have the implicit as something else I want. I guess I could get rid of the little AoE for a little bit more damage and energy shield, which wouldn't be bad. But yeah, most of my damage comes from all my spell damage that I have, my multiplicative damage, obviously my support gems, but my staff is really good and gives me a ton of damage here. I have tier 1 increased spell damage. I have tier 1 chaos damage over time multiplier. This is my only tier 1. This is my only regular damage over time multiplier that I have, and having some is important. If I didn't have this on my staff, I would definitely be picking up at least some kind of damage over time on my tree. And you can see that I used to, but I spec'd out of all of my damage. So yeah, this staff was really good. I made this staff myself with the Recombinator, and was the highlight of my league. Even over dropping Mage Blood about 150 hours into my playthrough on an unjuiced tier 16. Just was on the ground there. I was like, I knew what Mage Blood looked like. It was an important thing to me. I wish I had a video of it, but I just kind of like looked at the heavy belt and I saw the picture of Mage Blood and I was like, that's not Mage Blood. And I identified it, and I'm like, oh my god, it is. I was like, that's insane. I was freaking out. But yeah, the battery staff was much cooler because I was able to come up with, figure this out for myself. The battery staff is very significant on the build because I need it for my mana management, and I didn't have to put clarity on my build anymore because I cast with my energy shield. And all these stats are just crazy, and it was a huge upgrade from a very good staff that I had, which was a unique that I paid 17 div for, this Cane of Calmac, which was very good, and what I would be using now if I didn't have this staff that I made, and this carried me for a very large part of the game. But yeah, that's where most of my damage comes from, and I do put Blight and Essence Drain on the same supports because they just both do chaos dot damage, and my map clearing doesn't need another support on it. So this just saves me a ton of room on my build, and absolutely just makes Blight's damage so much higher than it would be if I put it on a 4-link or something else. And I have so many auras on my build that I have to 6-link them to Enlighten, Determination, Haste, Zealotry, Discipline to increase my energy shield, and then Purity of Lightning for my, we talked about that. And then I have Malevolence that is actually being reserved on life with Arrogance support. which it's also multiplicative damage. I kind of forgot about that. You do 20%, 21% more damage over time instead of increased damage over time. And Arrogance support buffs that just a little bit because it has it does 25% increased aura effect. So yeah, just having Blight on there lets me have so many auras and get a ton of defense, a ton of damage, a ton of quality of life with haste, phasing, just beautiful. And then when it comes to mana, I really don't need much because the only spells that are casting from mana are my Withering Step, Contagion, and Bane, which really don't use much. That's Bane, that's Contagion, and then this is Withering Step right there. They really don't use much, and that's because I don't need to cast my Essence Drain or Blight with mana because it uses my energy shield from my staff implicit that I was saying. That's the main reason I got the battery staff, because I was able to take clarity off, which is super nice. And the little bit of mana that I do need, I recover with this notable here, recover 2% of mana on kill. And that's really all I need, because if I'm casting Contagion, I'm killing a pack of enemies. If I'm casting Bane, it costs so little that I don't, and it lasts like 20 seconds, so I don't need to cast it all the time. And then Withering Step, I only cast like every 4 seconds at max. So I really just don't need much mana, so I really just got to recover it for map clearing with Contagion. And then for mana reservation, I have a bunch of auras linked to Enlighten, which I don't have a level 4 Enlighten. I have a level 3, but it does get a level from my Chevron's Wrappings. And I really just don't need a level 4. So I just haven't bought one yet. I would if I needed one, but I don't, because I have a lot of mana reservation on my helmet. I basically have double mana reservation with my Fractured Essence and then the Implicit from the Eater of Worlds. And then I have the, really zoomed in. I have these clusters of the mana reservation. It's mostly this one, 8%, 8%, 12%. I have the Mana Mastery, that's 12%. And then this cluster over here has 8% increased mana reservation. I think that's where it all comes from. But yeah, that's, oh, actually, not at all. I have it's two small clusters that give mana reservation. I talked about it when I was explaining Essence Drain in the beginning, but my Essence Drain actually pierces targets, and this is an insane defensive buff. And here's why. This is like actually, let me go to Photoshop. Okay, we'll say this is me right here, and then I'm mapping right here, and I come to a pack of enemies. They're all right here, and these are all enemies, all these like little dashes. Big pack of enemies, and I want to shoot Essence Drain at them. Well, actually I'm going to cast Contagion on them first. So let's say I cast it right here on all these people up front, because I just got to hit them with Essence Drain, and then boom, they'll all explode. Okay, well, the problem is, when I shoot Essence Drain, and then one of these enemies that I did not cast Contagion on jumps in front of it, and then eats the Essence Drain. They take the hit. It hits them. Boom. They're Essence Drained. They die immediately. I regenerate 1 health because it was just one enemy that was alive for 0.1 second. And then all of these enemies just unload. I gotta hit my brush again. They just they just freaking end me. And it's because this one enemy jumped in front of me and ate my Essence Drain. If my Essence Drain went and hit them, they all would have been dead. I would have been fine. And that's how I've died about 300 times, like minimum. So having piercing would make it go through that enemy and then hit the contagion enemies, and then they would all die. And it has been an amazing quality of life that I really wish I did like forever ago. It was only something I came up with recently. I don't know. Okay. I think that is really everything with where the build is at now. I have this sulfur flask. It increases my damage. I don't really use it often because it doesn't do too much, and I just have to press another button. I'm already pressing a lot. I probably could find something better for this slot, but I haven't looked in a long time, so that's something I could improve on. There's actually a few things I could improve on still. I could definitely get a better ring, but I'd probably have to spend a couple mirrors making it. The ring that I have now is actually very good. It has a lot of regen and a lot of energy shield and some cast speed, which I really can't be mad at. What else? The amulet, I can definitely get one of those +4 chaos skill gems +4 all skill gems, and +4 endurance charges, and then I could just spec into, I think this would get me to my 4th endurance charge, or the amulet has +4 minimum endurance charges. So if I got this, I would always have 4 endurance charges on me, and that would be nice. But that's about 4 mirrors right there to buy. Also, when it comes to Blight and my Vow Blight, I only have a level 20 gem with no quality. Because it's a Vow gem, it's kind of hard to get like the good versions of it, where it's a higher level and has 20% quality, because someone would have to go and double corrupt that themselves, and no one's doing that for Blight because I'm the only one that would actually want it on the whole market right now. And it's something I'm just gonna have to go do myself, which isn't a big deal, but just gotta go do it. And then I want to take my chance to avoid being shocked off my flask and put on decreased effective curses on me, because I can get that well over 100% with Mage Blood and the increased effects from the flask mods and the enchants. And I want to get rid of this gem, and I'll actually put the chance to avoid shock on a Hypnotic Eye Jewel. And if I got a literal perfect roll of and divined it, I could get 50% and get a perfect Adorned, and that would be all the 100% chance to avoid being shocked I would need for my Storm Shroud. But that's going to be expensive. That's like a mirror for a 100% increased effect on the Adorned. Since it's a corrupted jewel, you can't just sit there and divine it. And also on the Hypnotic Eye Jewel, I could put on Energy Shield. I think you can get like 80 flat Energy Shield, which is quite a bit. So it would increase my defenses, and I would still have everything that I really need. I would have my Curse immunity on my flask, and I'd have my Avoidance on the Hypnotic Eye Jewel that I would put there. And it's just because against bosses, when I don't want curses reflected on me, I don't know if there's actually any bosses that apply a curse, but it's unconditional curse immunity, so it's better than this. But right now, this is a good band-aid. I really don't know how else to improve my build otherwise, so if you have ideas or different ways I could even... I mean, if there was a good idea, I'd really reroute my whole tree and redo the whole thing, but I just don't see it at this point. I've thought about this a lot. I'm definitely not the best builder at the game. This is my first league, so if you have ideas, let me know. If you have any questions about the build or anything that I've talked about, leave it down in the comments, like the video. If you liked me just yapping for probably 30 minutes, this has probably been about this build, just leave a like. Or if you want to see other stuff that I have to do with PoE, leave a like. And subscribe if you want to see more PoE videos, or PoE 2 when that comes out. See ya.
I need Not until this land is cleansed! I shall cut you down! Perish! What I become?
Futile. The stars betray us. I have already seen all the chaos burned up. Temples around the mirror. Give in. Defiant will. Broken, hostile. All wrath is. I may not remember.
Father, no!
Putrefy, rot, spoil, and fester.
Exile, do something!
I need more mana.